very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Well, Lagos will theoretically peak in the month of August, talking about COVID-19. Those are the words coming through from Lagos themselves, the Commissioner for Health, letting the country know that. That is what lots of people have been waiting to hear for a while, but now that it's come theoretically, remember the operational word there. So, because they've seen the trajectory and how some of these things are played out, all the measures to ease the lockdown notwithstanding, the practicality of some of those are some of the things we'll look at now. But if you look at a couple of days now, 3 days thereabout, when they had 88 cases, and then it moved on above that to over 100, and I think there was about 192 cases in addition to the 88 that was recorded. And then the recent figures, which showed that there was additional 30. And so you just look at that. Sometimes it's really difficult to prepare. But he did say, look, their prediction model does indicate that Lagos will peak theoretically in the month of August, and then it will flatten out. So keeping tabs on those particular words, quite interesting to notice that one. But then he also did say that they're making efforts to increase the private and the capacity to test. But interestingly, it turns out that, yes, well, I know that we've heard several people say time and again, if you try to get this test, it's, I think they say it's about 40,000 naira to get that test. But if you want to get it real quick, it's going to cost you about 70,000 naira or so for those who have tried it. But then they say, look, if you actually have come down with the symptoms, it's supposed to be free. So those are some of the challenges about all of those things. But it's good to see that they're speaking about these cases now in terms of when we need to peak, when we need to flatten out, and the kind of measures we expect to take. Yes, the community efforts to see that the testings continue will always be an important component.
Well, glad to know at least that for on the one hand, Lagos, which is the epicenter in Nigeria, has been able to, we can say, put a lead or at least get a hold, so to speak, on the, well, at least get a hold. I mean, for the government to be able to say we should peak by August, I mean, that would suggest
theoretically.
Okay, well, theoretically have a hold then. At least that is in a sense, quite comforting. But what I'm worried about, and which I believe many people would be worried about as well, is the partnership of the people with government in all of this. I mean, Chamberlain just mentioned the community, transmission, which of course that's the phase that we are in. In fact, it seems like we've been at that community transmission almost from the very, very beginning, with the unknown source appendage given to the fourth sources of infection on the NDDC list for a very long time, which gave us concern. And of course, that's something in the region of 70 or 80% right now. But so back to that issue of the community conversations, the kind of conversation that the government is having with the people in order for them to take ownership. Many of the pictures you will see on the streets, even where you go, wherever you go, anywhere, in buses, public places, people are hardly ever keeping tabs with all of that that is being recommended by the PTF COVID-19, the NDDC, even the Lagos State government, which is to keep social distance, to wear masks, and all those little things. Well, so that in its sense, I mean, look at the pictures you're seeing. Hardly is anyone wearing any of these masks, and that would give you something.
Wow, interesting stats.
These are the stats from the Lagos State government.
But earlier they had said that the state was going to record about between 90,000 to 120,000 cases by July or August.
Yeah.
Then eventually you also hear it says, look, for every one person that tested positive, that there are probably 10 people that are positive. So and have not been tested.
That probability is still very, very valid, if you ask me. And I believe that's why the Lagos State government is making these projections. These are there. They are still valid. As a matter of fact, one of the things that a number of other health practitioners have said is that because of the nature of the virus, some may have it and not even know it, and then it'll ease out of their system. That's definitely not something to take home and sleep over, because how do you know the kind of impact impact that this virus is going to have on you as a person? I mean, do you even know whether you are juiced up enough, having a strong enough immunity system to be able to bear it? And then another thing that's
even those who have it still contract it.
Exactly,
that's the thing.
Exactly. So another thing that gives me concern is the percentage of recovery and the speed at which the recovery is done. We still don't have those figures. Although someone on Twitter engaged us when we asked the question, why does it seem like more men have it than more women? That is definitely something that gives a number of people concern. So while the government is, doing its own part, the PTF at the federal level and the various state interventions are doing their own part, we have our own responsibility as well to take responsibility and stay safe. Mark?
Well, gentlemen, good morning. Let's quickly look at some of the things that came up yesterday, also at the PTF COVID-19 briefing. I think it's very important to state that, for those who live in Lagos, it looks like, there is some light at the end of this pandemic tunnel. But listening to some analysis yesterday on some of our COVID-19 programs, analysts, especially the scientists, virologists, health practitioners have told us to accept that with some cautious optimism, because as Chamberlain has pointed out, it's in theory and it could change depending on what we do or do not do. Let's not forget that right now we haven't opened churches and schools are yet to open as well. If by some fate of luck they decide that they want to open, chances are very high that projection of peaking by August could change. That's what they have said. So in some ways, while you might say that it's a good thing that it looks like we have very clear projections that somewhere towards August we could be peaking, and after that, we don't know how long the peak will last for. We now begin to taper down. That's definitely something to chair, and then we could see more institutions reopening because we now believe that we're beginning to come out of the virus. But if we decide not to exercise the patience which we've exercised so far, all of these projections could change drastically. And, anything could happen. That's what the health practitioners have told us. Another very interesting development that came up yesterday was the briefing by the PTF, by the Presidential Task Force, which said that they're beginning to look at going digital because one of their members, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, came down with the coronavirus disease. I guess they say he's doing very well, he's getting better, but they're not taking any chances. They already said they're testing all their members there, and they're also testing, interestingly, just before all of this came up, they had already made plans to test all the journalists who cover their program. But they say to minimize contact, they're looking at going digital. So in some ways, that is also very welcome. The fact that we're looking at doing things, well, how we've seen other countries do them. You see what is happening in the UK and how, even though there's a daily briefing, it avoids contact as much as possible. So if we can do that, it means that, we can really get things done here. They also made it a point of duty to commend states that have cancelled Salah festivities. They say it is all in order. And, this is something that they certainly encourage. And as we did mention yesterday, we said, indeed, this is in order. It continues to remind us that we're still not out of the woods yet when it comes to this disease. Don't forget that only 2 days ago or thereabout, another high-profile person was said to have come down with the coronavirus disease. And one of the messages he wants to push out there is the fact that this disease is real and we should take it very seriously. So let us hope that these messages, as they're coming in trickles, people take them seriously, that, people in Lagos don't let down their guards in the name that, we're going to peak in August anyway. A lot of it is still very dependent on what we do or do not do. So, yes, something to chair, but still not yet out of the woods. And we need to take serious precautions as we approach August to ensure that, indeed, we peak in August and begin to taper down. Gentlemen.
Oh, yes, indeed. And don't forget, testing, it's the engine, the lifeblood of some of these figures, because he says, look, at the moment, Lagos is, I think they're doing 1,000 tests per day. They're planning to increase to between 2,500 and 4,000, but no rapid test kit is approved because they give false positives and false negatives. So just in case you want to be tested, once now, he says, For those who need to be tested, he says the public sector will handle that. But if you want to be, the private sector will handle that. Yeah, that's the way it goes. All right, we'll be back and see how are the dailies reflecting developments in the country in just a moment. Hang on. Welcome back. Take a look at Vanguard for a start. NDDC, we failed in our oversight duties. Senate vows to review NDDC Act, urge presidency to retake NDDC, asks IMC to refund extra budgetary expenditure of 4.923 billion naira. Reps move to sue Akpabio for perjury, defamation. Lawmakers got contracts. 9th Assembly not involved. Akpabio. So there you go. Sometimes you look at this and you want to digest it, right? But it is what you find here. So Lagos records 203 new infections as confirmed cases rise to 38,948. Still keeping tabs on that COVID there. Outrage over mass killings in North. So you just wonder. And then you see that image right there. ATYAP women protest killing. So something that continues to raise a lot of concern. Don't forget, more tourists, commuters face hardship as Third Mainland Bridge closes tonight. No mad rush now. We thought that, well, who knows? The people will do what they have to do, won't they? But Lagos government works controller allay fears. So all of that in the mix as well. Right there. Mr. and Mrs. I know they are my children, Mr. is telling Mrs. on the table, but their appetite during this pandemic period is scary. I pray school resumes quickly. Why do I feel lots of parents can identify with this one? Okay, well, Mrs. just says, well, you see, just 2 children and you're complaining? Yet your favorite phrase is, but you know, before I would. So, there you go. It's, what you see, those pandemic times. Well, take a quick look at the back page now, Vanguard Sports. Onyekuru eyes EPL return. Should be interesting. Shorumurali's support for Yama. Yeah, I'd like to see him back with those gloves. Tyson making comeback return. So, lots of other items there. That's Vanguard this morning.
The Guardian newspaper is pretty much towing the same line as the Vanguard newspaper this morning on the reps. Says knocks anger as Akpabio denies claim against reps. Lawmakers threaten lawsuit. Minister denies implicating lawmakers. Sack minister. CSOs tell Buhari. Well, find out the details on the Guardian newspaper this morning. Continues on page 6. Right under the picture you see there of our president and that of the Prime Minister of Mali. 150 billion naira Hajj fees trapped over cancelled pilgrimage. More details of that is in the paper this morning, and right under those that 2 stories you find at Arotile's burial, cleric advises government to stop neglecting patriots. Find that on page 3. Government, WAEC, review timetable for WASC. Find out what the latest is on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper this morning. And women go naked over fresh killings in Kaduna. Again, that story is on page 3. Very, very troubling, you would say. That's the Guardian newspaper this morning.
Well, let's quickly run through the Nigerian Tribune for you. You see there, reps probe missing 100 billion naira at Northeast Development Commission. Well, don't ask me. That's what they have on the front page. Looks like it's a season of missing monies. Looking just on top of the nameplate, partial closure of Third Mainland Bridge begins. Going for 2023 election without restructuring will spell doom, says Yoruba Summit Group. And gunmen attack Plateau Court, whisk away 6 kidnap robbery suspects. This was very troubling when this news broke out yesterday. I think that the prison authorities need to be briefing to say particularly what happened. The suspects were being taken to court and they were freed by unknown gunmen. Well, there's no way you'll know the gunman, is there? Looking just at the bottom now, NDDC, Senate asks Ponde-led management to refund 4.923 billion naira. How probable is that? Well, you might want to read details on page 4. COVID-19, federal government, state, commissioners, others to meet July 30 on schools reopening. Now, I also know that the Pediatric Association of Nigeria has also asked to be a part of that meeting because they also have very strong views on what should happen when stakeholders meet. And they believe that they're also one of the stakeholders that should be a part of the meeting when that eventually takes place. You see the picture there, a very sad one, the body of late flying officer Tolulokwe Arotile being laid to rest here in Abuja yesterday. Let's leave it there for the Nigerian Tribune.
Well, Daily Trust reads, reps allege 100 billion naira fraud in Northeast Development Commission. You may wonder what's going on. When was this set up? How come there's this 100? But look at the riders, maybe that might help. We didn't get up to 100 billion naira. NDDC MD were not aware of allegation ascribed to the ministry. Senate asks NDDC to refund 4.9 billion naira. We can't join issues with legislators. So that's a quote from somewhere right there. So that is the big one on the front page. Well, they also do have lots of pictures there. Tears as flying officer Arotile is buried in Abuja. So that's what you also find right there. But add to that, Kaduna traders struggle for survival as markets remain closed. Yeah, but private universities are planning to open their campuses now. So who knows what happens soon. That's Daily Trust today.
Take a look at News Direct. It leads, of course, with the same probe story, this time NDDC. Senate orders MD to refund 4.923 billion naira illegal payments. Find that story on page 5. House of Reps set to drag Akpabio to court. And I was misquoted, Mr. Akpabio. No 2.3 billion naira bridge at Elebele, Bayelsa. It's a media aide speaking. Find out which of them that is on page 5 of the paper this morning. And right above the nameplate, Osinbajo welcomes international community's support for execution of COVID-19 response. That story is on page 3. Governor Bello, ministers present as first female combat pilot Tolulokwe Arotile is buried. Find that story on page 3 of the paper this morning. Nimasa Customs to clamp down on imposters over abuse of TIP. And Pantame Commission's NCC's Kaduna Emergency Communications Center, 5 other IT projects. That story is on page 13. Projects will drive digital economy, according to Dambata. Find the details of that in the News Direct newspaper this morning. That's the News Direct today.
The Daily Times is the next one here. Domestic airlines on brink of collapse. Yes, that's the story they have for you on the front page. The picture, of course, is not related to it. The picture is a very sad one, which you've seen on most of the dailies already. The body of the late flying officer Tolulokwe being laid to rest. And it was difficult not to shed a tear too, watching the visuals yesterday. But page 2 will give you that story about the sector of the economy which is facing imminent collapse, domestic airlines on brink of collapse. You also see there, they have a tribute to her amid tears, flying officer Arotile buried with full military honors. That's also on the front page of the Daily Times. Health, they're talking about more than 10,000 African health workers have COVID-19, says WHO. Yes, they continue to carry the can. And that's the reason we have to, spare a thought for them and just, protect ourselves. Corruption, reps take on Northeast Development Commission over alleged 105, is that 5 or 3? It's 105 billion naira sleeves. Yes, that's on the front page as well. And they have the editorial for you, written on their front page, Airport COVID-19 Protocols Breaches. Yes, they have a comment or two on it. You can start checking it out from their front page, continue somewhere inside the paper. That's over there for the Daily Times.
Okay, so there you go. Just looking at some of the other dailies where you see City is giving Guardiola 330 million euros for summer transfers. Oh dear. Wow. Anyway,
Is this
just a little
is this
football
cash
thinking. No, paper.
for playing football?
There you go.
Chamberlain, why don't we?
Well, that's look at some of the dailies here this morning. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Let's kick off with that. Remember some new developments as it were. Victor Gewa joins us now. He's a legal practitioner from our studios in Abuja. Good morning and thank you for joining us today. But having seen how this is playing out, the recommendations of the Senate. First of all, how do you see this recommend? Do you actually think that these recommendations will be far-reaching? Oh, okay. Well, he's going to come up pretty soon because, yes, we did see or hear in that report how the Senate did speak about what they'd like to see happen. But the House of Reps on their part, well, remember that is ongoing at the moment, even though the Speaker did direct the clerk of the House to take certain actions. But, well, the Senate did come up with those, and you then think, okay, what next for these recommendations from the Senate? So how are they planning to give it, what, do you call it the force of law, as it were, if it's a recommendation? How far can they go with that?
You know, one of the things that a number of people will be wondering is, okay, so you're asking the NDDC as a body to refund, or the IMC of the NDDC as a body to refund some money. The question then you want to ask is, maybe perhaps, maybe dive down, the money should be traceable, right? It must have gone through certain bank accounts, right? So why don't you just do that? Is there any way the Senate can order that, is there any way the Senate can order that as part of their recommendations to whoever the agency that is going to take that on is? Is there any way they can take that on? And then we've been talking about the EFCC, the ICPC, and these other bodies, investigating and fighting corruption in the land. How far-reaching will these recommendations of the Senate go in helping them, or even moving them or instigating them to take action as far as dealing with these issues is concerned? It's really funny, Chamberlain, that on the one hand we are talking about the NDDC, and so many other issues are rising here and there. We heard about the probe of the power sector by the National Assembly as well. We just recently also heard about the probe of the NEDC.
Well, no, the honourable gentleman said, while he was reading that the money is said. He's not reading the news. If you're on the floor of the House, you expect to say with some sort of tone of finality.
There should be some evidence.
But that's why people can deny, say, look, I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
So it's up to them then.
Well, we can say, yeah, that's perhaps a developing story, okay? Whether or not that is true, we'll see in the next few days. But it seems to be a season of probes. And we're not just talking about millions or even just monies. We're talking about billions.
So there are quite a number of issues, both the ones that played out in the House of Assembly and in the Senate. Well, let's get to Abuja now. Victor Gewa is there, and then you also have Honorable Dachun Bagos, who is a member of the Anti-Corruption Committee. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today on the program. Let me start with you, Mr. Gewa. First, the recommendations by the Senate. Well, yes, we have heard what they've spoken about previously about recommendations or resolutions, if you will, from the National Assembly. How do you see this recommendation from the Senate going in terms of whether or not it's going to be adhered to?
Well, thank you very much. It is, first of all, I need to state that it is a good thing that the National Assembly is actually looking at the NDDC. Of course, the House of Representatives is conducting the public hearing because of the homunculus corrupt, issues that are coming up from, various quarters about the NDDC. And I need to say that if you look at the NDDC, you need to look at where the interest is. If you look at the NDDC Act, Section 14 is very key in considering what Nigerians and what the National Assembly is talking about. Section 14 of the NDDC Act talks about public funding of the NDDC. And Chamberlain, you need to have an idea of what we are talking about. Section 14 says that the fund of NDDC shall be 15% of the total statutory allocation, monthly statutory allocation of all the Niger Delta states, the 9 states that make up the NDDC, 15% of their monthly statutory allocation. 3% of the total budget of all the oil companies operating both offshore and onshore. 3% of their total budget in a year will be allocated to the NDDC. And finally, 50% of the ecological fund, 50% of the ecological fund that is going to the Niger Delta states will be committed to the fund of NDDC. So you can see that we are talking about a large, huge sum of money. And of course, this is what is generating the interest. Where is this money going to? What kind of development are we supposed to see in this area? And now the National Assembly, the Senate have come up with certain recommendations. Now, first of all, that is appreciable. We appreciate that fact. But I have some issues with that. Because if you look at Section 17 of the NDDC Act, it says that the board shall be appointed, the board of the commission shall be appointed by the president, subject to the confirmation of the Senate in consultation with the House of Representatives. And so it means that anybody who is going to be a member of that board must have an input from the House of Representatives. So what am I saying? The House of Representatives is conducting a hearing. The hearing have not been concluded. And so it is very important that the Senate allows all the actors that are supposed to give evidence and testimony to those issues. Those are reports. You need to hear from those actors. And the House of Representatives should come out with its findings and conclusion before you talk about whether money should be refunded, how it should be refunded, so that we can have an holistic approach to these issues. And so the House of Representatives cannot be conducting a public hearing, which is still ongoing, and the Senate is still making recommendations.
Thing is, when you talk about where the monies are going, the Section 14.3 eventually tells you the board how to administer it, but that's part of what the investigation is trying to sort out. I thought Section 17 was talking about the powers of the board to borrow and such other items, but we'll come to that. Let me go on to Honorable Bagos. Do we expect any recommendations from, because, I mean, we've seen some actions already. Do we expect recommendations from the House of Representatives as well? We're not sure if they're going to re-invite the NDDC, acting MD, and whatnot.
Yeah, morning. Absolutely. There will be recommendations from the National Assembly because every public hearing and every investigation, there is a report. And the report was supposed to have been late yesterday, but because of the voluminous number of how bulky the report is. It wasn't ready yesterday, but definitely a report will be laid on the floor of the House, and not only that, recommendations will be made, because this is not an issue that will just go under the carpet. One of the major and cardinal role of the Ninth Assembly is to fight corruption. And if you look at the legislative agenda of the Ninth Assembly, transparency and accountability and fight against corruption, it's very key. So it's one issue that the Ninth National Assembly is very, very, very serious about, that Nigerians need transparency, Nigerians need accountability, and we're very happy and so confident that yesterday the minister have to even retract his statement on accusing the members of the Ninth National Assembly.
Mr. Giwa, one wonders, what's going on with this? If the minister did accuse them, and as Honorable Bago says, he recants, doesn't it appear as though some people are taking Nigerians for a ride?
Yes, that is exactly what is. That's exactly how it is. I mean, it looks actually like a drama. It's like one of these our Nollywood movie. If you allow me to put it that way. You see, this is a serious business, and interestingly, I am from the Niger Delta. I am from Edo State, and it really pricks me that monies that are supposed to be used for the development of the Niger Delta states and community. Like I said, I have a community where, as I'm talking to you right now, the report we are having is that flood has taken over a community in Edo State, one of the Niger Delta community. Hilushi in particular. Nobody is talking about it.
Mr. Giwa,
we are talking about the monies that have gone.
I just want to find out, will that be determined to be lying under oath?
Well, you need to look at the perspective of how he said it. I am not the lawyer to Akpabio, but what he actually said was that members of the National Assemblies, 60% of the contracts were awarded to members of the National Assembly. Now watch it. He did not particularize. He did not say the 9th Assembly or the 8th Assembly. If you are an honorable last year, or in the 8th Assembly, you are still an honorable. You are honorable for life. So what I'm saying is that he said, and I watched it carefully, and of course we were invited, as one of the persons to provide information. But he said that 60% of the contracts were awarded to members of the National Assembly. Now, it did not say House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is part of the National Assembly. So it was not too particularized. So I think that what should have been done by the committee, is for them to give him some time, or for the committee to ask him to provide the information. And I need to say it. It is also not proper, in my own view, that the Speaker in a session should ask the senator, the Minister for Niger Delta, to within 24 and 48 hours to produce the names and the list and the details of those contracts. I believe that the chairman of the committee, because the hearing is still going on, because we had, just some days ago where the Speaker, threatened to institute legal action against Senator Akpabio. That, to me, will amount to intimidation because the hearing is still going on. The hearing has not been concluded. I believe that it is the duty of the chairman of that committee to have confronted Akpabio with those facts and say, look, it is good that you are mentioning this, but we will also need to have those details. We will also need to have the contracts. We will also need to have these names and all the documents so that we can also, because that is one of the things they are investigating.
So, Mr. Giwa, just one moment. You will also recognize, just one moment, Mr. Giwa, just one moment. You will also realize that he didn't say members, Mr. Akpabio, Governor, Senator Akpabio, didn't mention the committee, he didn't mention the NDDC committee. He mentioned the National Assembly. So for you to reduce it to the members of the committee taking him on that, you may want to respond to that one. But then, because he has mentioned members of the National Assembly, not according to you, particularizing whether it is even the 9th Assembly or the 8th Assembly, doesn't that in any way indict he himself, being a member, having been a member of the NDDC, subcommittee of the Senate before? Shouldn't he mention names so that people know who to call and your people in the Niger Delta will also know?
Yeah, I think I should come in here from what Mr. Giwa just said, Chambali, just to clear some of the perspective before going far on the direction Mr. Giwa said. You see, if you had followed proceedings of the House yesterday, Senator Akpabio wrote and replied the House that he was misquoted by saying that 60% of the contracts were to National Assembly members. The Speaker read the letter on the floor of the House yesterday where Akpabio replied the House saying that he was misquoted by saying that 60% of the contracts went to National Assembly members. But on the letter he wrote to the House yesterday, he said he meant that 60% of projects of NDDC, it's on medical, and that's why they appointed a medical personnel as executive director of project. That was what he said on that letter yesterday. And I think it's very important for perception of the House that the press should be able to get that letter, digest it very well on the reply of Mr. Akpabio, because he said that he was misquoted. And if his letter yesterday saying that he was misquoted, and if we have proof that he said that 60% of the contract went to National Assembly members, invariably he lied under oath. There is no two way about that. If 2 days, 3 days ago, he said that 60% of the contracts went to National Assembly members, and yesterday on the reply that he wrote to the House saying that he was misquoted, that no, not 60% of the contracts when he checked, and that it was not 60% of the contract, he was misquoted that 60% of the projects were on medical. So definitely he lied under oath. There's no two way about that. And you see, one thing, because anyone can say anything about the National Assembly because of the perception that people already have on the National Assembly. And like I said earlier, one thing that we want to really clear on the 9th National Assembly is that let's change the perception.
All right, Honorable Bagos, just hang on a minute. Let's get back to that tape. Let's just listen to that tape again, just to be sure.
We cannot close down Niger Delta because of the security implications of the region. Sorry, sir. We cannot close down Niger Delta Development Commission because of the fact that we are doing forensic audit. The NDDC plays a vital role in ensuring the peace and security of the region. And 90% or more of the resources of the country on a monthly basis comes from there. If you close it down in totality, all you have will be chaos. And you have a lot of, not just militancy, but you have a lot of insurrection. So it is important that people who have gone to court, people who genuinely did jobs, should be paid for their jobs. So for me, I'm not against it, because of course, who are even the greatest beneficiaries? It's you people now. Okay. Because if you look at your chairman,
Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, that's okay. That's okay.
Can I
ask you that question? What is the benefit that the National Assembly is benefiting from? It's okay.
Are you asking me the benefit of National Assembly?
Yes, you just said.
I just told you that we have record to show that most of the contracts in NDDC are given out to members of National Assembly, but you don't know about it.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's okay. The two chairmen can explain to you. That is why I was a member. I was a member of the NDDC committee.
It's okay.
Wait, you were a member of
the famous it's okay off your mic. That's where they got it from anyway, in case you're wondering. But then, gentlemen, listening to that, Mr. Giwa, yes, from what he says there, Honorable Bagos insists that he lied under oath, saying they've got documents to show?
Again, I wish you could
Go ahead.
play back the tape of the speaker's.
Ms. Honorable, just hang on. Let Mr. Giwa respond to that now. Let's get Mr. Giwa to respond whether or not that can be deemed as lying under oath.
Okay, yes. You heard what he said. He said most of the contracts were, he has record that most of the contracts were given to members of the National Assembly. And he said, ask chairman of the committees. The chairman of the committee he's talking about is the chairman of the committee for the Senate and the chairman for the committee of the House of Representatives. As at the time those contracts in question were talking about, and it couldn't have been the Ninth Assembly, because, I mean, it couldn't have, because that is not what is the subject of the investigation. So it will not amount to lying on oath, not by mere fact that he wrote a letter to explain, like Honorable just said, about all. The question is this. The question is this, is whether or not, and this is a former senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, a former governor, and the current minister of Niger Delta, who is saying that I have on record that most of these contracts were given, that first of all, he said they were beneficiaries. He now said we're given to members of the National Assembly. No, I am not his lawyer, like I said.
The chairman will know.
It will not amount to
no,
lying
Mr.
on
Giwa,
oath.
did you hear the part? Can you hear me?
With evidence.
Did you hear the part where he says your chairman will know? Why did they recuse the chairman in the first place?
Of the committees. The chairman of the House of Representatives and the chairman of the Senate. Because they have chairman for the Niger Delta in the Senate and the chairman of the House Committee for the Niger Delta in the House of Representatives. And let me tell you, this, like he said, is based on record. And let me tell you, it cannot be far from the truth.
Okay, let me bring this back to Honorable Bagos now. With all of these that is going on, I know you wanted to clear something the other time, but if you also listen to the statement that he made, which you just heard, he didn't use the past tense. He used the present tense. It is you people, you heard him say. And he says, most of the contracts are, not were, are given to members of the National Assembly. Do you think his letter is strong enough to reverse the fact that he wasn't speaking in the past tense, but in the present?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, I just wish you could still play, you could get the clip of the speaker reading his letter yesterday. Definitely, whether he's speaking on past or present, and let me dwell on the present because I'm a member of the 9th National Assembly. And one thing that I know, and which is a fact, is that as a member of the 9th National Assembly, I will not and I cannot see any corrupt issues and tendency and keep quiet about it. And from yesterday, after reading the letter, the speaker gave the letter to Committee on Ethics and to investigate what he said on the letter. And even if any member is found culpable, definitely will face the wrath of the law. And again, in saying
to wrap up now, pardon me to jump in and ask you this one. Could you respond?
The 9th National Assembly just passed the budget.
I need to bring this in before we wrap up. We've got less than 2 minutes. Now, Mr. Giwa did say that the speaker coming in at that point could be tantamount to intimidation because the hearing is still going on. There hasn't been reports or committees. So do you consider it as such? Can you hear me?
Oh, I didn't. Please come again. I couldn't hear it.
Mr. Giwa did say that the speaker coming in at that point, having even initially said, look, this is just question asking, no serious matter about it at the time he did. And then to have given him 48 and 24 hours is tantamount to intimidation because the hearing, the probe, is still ongoing. So this may lead to a predetermined conclusion.
Not really, because you see, perception is very important. Like some of us that are not even members of the Niger Delta, and the minister said members of the National Assembly, my constituents are already asking me where is the contract that the minister said that we have received. So to me, it's not intimidation, but trying to clear the air and to make sure that most of us are cleared from whatsoever allegation that the minister have brought into bear, and to tell you the level of corruption that is already out there, and to also a sound of advice to the executive that, look, this is the time that we should be able to look at all MDAs, not only the NDDC, that the level of corruption in every ministry, department, and agencies, because the members of the National Assembly have an oversight in all the MDAs. So now, invariably, every head of MDA will now saying that members are beneficiary of contracts from the National Assembly.
All right, just give us a moment.
Some level of
we'll come back to you. We'll just give a few more minutes. We'll return and let both of you conclude your thoughts in just a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Well, Mr. Giwa, how does the Speaker weighing in at that point, how do you interpret that as being tantamount to intimidation?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very clear, and with due respect to the Speaker, it amounts to intimidation. It amounts to prejudging it amounts to prejudging the public hearing that he himself set up by the House of Representatives. It amounts to threatening other witnesses who might come to substantiate or deny any of those facts. Because if you look at what he said, look, we are going to take him up on perjury. And look at the first paragraph of that letter, that the chairman of each of the houses exercise unusual influence. Unusual influence. So he's still holding on that position. What he was able to do by that letter was to say he was not referring to the 9th Assembly. So it is proper for the committee members to have waded into the issue than the Speaker. The Speaker has not had the privileges of hearing from other members. He is just the Speaker of the House of Representatives. He's not the Speaker of the Senate. What if, for example, somebody from the Senate comes in and said, yes, as a member of the committee of NDDC, I took contract because my constituency are entitled to do contracts. What if a member of the committee from the Senate comes out and say that? Will you now say that Akpabio was wrong? So it was prejudicial, it was hasty, it was intimidating, and I think he was prejudging the Minister for Niger Delta. And I think it is very, very hasty for the Speaker to have done that.
Well, you're a lawyer. Perhaps another lawyer might look at it a different way. But let me take this to Honorable Bagos now. Part of the conversations around this NDDC probe, just as you said, is really mind-boggling, and it is not new. In 2015, for instance, the Auditor General at the time revealed that 183 billion naira was diverted from the NDDC. And, he insisted and he stood by his word and he dared anyone to say anything against him. Now we're talking about another 80 billion naira or 40 billion naira, whichever, figures you want to look at. All these things are happening. The Auditor General's report has always contained part of these things. And it is an audit report. How useful is it for you, as a member of the Anti-Corruption Committee, to look at the books of the NDDC and do whatever it is that is needful? Because many are wondering, we already have this. Why open other panels of inquiry when we have an auditor's report?
Yeah, well, it's quite unfortunate that some of these development commissions were established to address issues of their region, and it has turned out to be that the development commissions is now the problem of such regions. Because imagine 81 billion being spent out of extra budgetary provision within 5 months and even under COVID. So that is a very serious issue. And look at 81 billion, what it could have done to the people of the Niger Delta. Go to Niger Delta today, you feel sorry. We discussed with a lot of members from the Niger Delta region and issues that are on ground. It's something that the executive needs to take very, very serious. From 2015 till now, I'm sure that somebody supposed to have been in jail by now, and nobody is yet in jail. And this is an issue that the executive really needs to look into, the issue of fighting corruption very, very seriously. They should take that seriously, not just the blaming game of the previous administration. Corruption is in every system, whatsoever administration that have come in. So it's time to really go back to the drawing board and look at these issues extensively, because we can't continue in a country like this. It is not acceptable. And the Anti-Corruption Committee is definitely looking into issues like this alongside the anti-corruption agencies. And its issue is an issue that it has not yet ended, because the recommendations from the probe will come
just
out.
One moment,
and once it's been laid, the Anti-Corruption Committee
you're not speaking
will as well
to
take it
just
from
one
there.
moment, Honorable Bagos, just one moment. I'm asking, how useful is the Auditor General's report over the years in looking at the books of the NDDC? I don't know if your committee has considered the Auditor General's report as an instrument you can use to check the books of the NDDC.
Yeah, absolutely. If not because of the pandemic that has ravaged the country, the Anti-Corruption Committee have already laid and looked at its work plan to look at most of the MDAs, especially as reports that have been taken from the Auditor General's office, and Public Accounts Committee as well are looking into issues, and most of the Auditor General's reports. And this is an issue that the Anti-Corruption Committee is seriously taking to the front burner, because most of the Auditor General's report has indicted a lot of MDAs. And we cannot continue like this as a country. And like I said earlier, the 9th Assembly, we have taken it as one of our cardinal roles to see that we open the National Assembly to be transparent as it is. And I'm very happy with the response from Akpabio, because perception is very important. His initial perception has given the general public that, oh, the National Assembly is corrupt. But at least his reply has said that, look, the 9th Assembly has not partaken in that, because the 9th Assembly has a different agenda. I will not be able to speak on what happened in the previous Assembly. But what the cardinal agenda of the 9th Assembly is that, look, we must open the National Assembly for people to see how transparent it is. And that is why some of this probe and public hearing is on the front burner. So definitely, the Anti-Corruption Committee is looking into the Auditor General's report. The Anti-Corruption Committee is looking into all MDAs, not only the NDDC. We have a lot of work to do for the Nigerian people, because we cannot sit down and the perception outside is saying that we are millionaires, we are billionaires, and so on and so forth. As an individual, okay, I know the role my people
Mr. Bago, just a minute. Mr. Giwa, so does that address those issues for you, for those members who think that, well, yeah, this may have vindicated members of the 9th National Assembly? Is that how it works?
Well, for them, I could say that I can concede that it has. But that has not still excluded, because contracts will still be awarded. And it is not even the first time we are hearing. There was a time the president was talking about constituency project of the National Assemblies. Some of these members of the National Assemblies in their committees have become award-receiving centers, where you are a committee and while you are supervising certain agencies of government, you start asking for contracts. You will tie it to your constituency. This is not the first time it is an issue. Most members of the National Assembly have become contract-receiving members and senators. And it is there. It was a major issue some few months ago. Even it drew the attention of the president. And when we start talking about probing constituency project, which in some cases they were not even executed. And as a lawyer, I'm also aware that a lot of contractors receive contracts from members of National Assemblies, and they will tell you they are doing it for their constituency. So it is not actually out of place for you to see members. And again, if you look at it, some of the members will tell you they are also Nigerians, and they can also do contracts. So it is just very simple. But the point is that Nigerians and our members who go to National Assembly should look at the development of the communities, should look at the interests of the people, should ensure that Nigerians derive benefits from such process, including the NDDC. And I think that is what we should pursue.
So, Honorable Bagos, what if
Mr. Giwa have raised.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
Because every National Assembly member is representing a constituency from the entire 36 states. And every constituency has a constituency project domiciled in different MDAs. Because what we usually do is to generate needs of our constituents and give it to the executive. National Assembly members don't execute projects. As far as I'm concerned, this is my 1 year in the National Assembly. All I know is that some projects have been domiciled in my constituency, which we lobby to make sure that, look, this project, even if it is road, even if it is water, whatsoever, has been domiciled in our constituency. And to execute those projects is the responsibility of the MDAs. That is exclusive the responsibility of the NDAs. And again, if you recall what Mr. Akpabio said during the public hearing, he said that, look, when he was accusing the chairman of the committee of executing projects, and he now retracted his statement even at the public hearing, he said, no, that the project, the contract is domiciled in the chairman's constituency, not that the contract was given to the chairman. So these are issues that I really wish we could really come out to understand and look at those levels, because no member of the National Assembly is a contractor. And I can assure you from the Anti-Corruption Committee, from Ethics Committee, and so on and so forth, if any member of the National Assembly is found capable of engaging in contracts, definitely he will fail the wrath of the law. Because we said that, look, this 9th National Assembly, we must be transparent in that. So Mr. Giwa's perception in that National Assembly members are contractors, that is absolutely wrong, especially from what I have seen from the 9th Assembly.
Now,
we are here to see that, look,
Honorable Bagos, just a minute.
Do we
go ahead and say, well, look, the nature of some of these things is such that there are times that they could get this contract even recently, and then they backdate this contract. We've seen these kind of things happen. So should we then say, on the strength of what you say, that no member is a contractor or not? Do we go back to, say, 5 years and see who got what from the NDDC just for the benefit of doubt? Would that be okay to do that?
Well, absolutely, because if
even before they join the National Assembly,
NDDC can really come out with such issues, why not? Because Nigerians need to know. And not only that, the perception that is already on the National Assembly, which some of us are looking at how we can make things to move right, definitely we want to know. If previous members of the National Assembly have benefited from the NDDC or any MDA's contract, definitely we will need to know so that Nigerians will know that we are on a new phase of legislation. Our role that we need to carry out, we need to be able to execute it. But if previous National Assembly members are contractors, then definitely we need to know so that we'll be able to tell the general public that, look, the previous National Assembly members were contractors, but the 9th National Assembly, this is what we need to do. And again, it's something that we cannot only do it alone. Executive is there. The executive that executes most of these contracts. Who are the executive giving some of these alleged contracts to the National Assembly members? Because if the executive are giving the National Assembly members contracts directly, then definitely that is part of the corruption that we are
that could then
about.
mean that perhaps no member of the National Assembly will unduly call or send people to those members to go give them contracts, perhaps. But Mr. Giwa, just give us your concluding thoughts now as we wind down on this one. So it seems justified that You didn't seem to, that he says you don't have those facts correct to say that members are contractors.
Let me put it in perspective, and I think you should get it. What I know is that, or what I can infer from what Senator Akpabio said, and if Senator Akpabio being a former senator, who is this? Sorry, excuse me, 1 minute. No, sorry, what I'm saying, just 1 minute. Just 1 minute.
When he has retracted his statement saying that, look, what I said was on error or whatever, he's later clearly said that, look, members of the National Assembly are not. So you cannot continue to dwell on what Akpabio said because of his perception on what he has said.
Let me say what I know. Now, what I know is that members of the National Assembly in their various committees interface with the executives and head of MDAs, and especially when projects are in their constituency, like he said, they always ask and request that they recommend contractors. It is not necessarily their companies, and I challenge them to prove me wrong. It is not necessarily their companies. They are not directors in those companies, but they will tell you, let us recommend contractors that will execute some of these projects. I am aware, I know, and I've seen them. I have fought for some contractors who I asked how they got the job, and they told me they were recommended by members of the National Assembly. So I'm speaking of facts. So I am not saying the companies might not belong to the members, but in most cases, and of course, my honorable here knows, those honorables and senators, they recommend these companies. The companies belong to their friends. The company might even be some good companies. But I know for sure that the members of National Assembly, in their various committee, do recommend companies to execute projects for the executive, and I've challenged them on that.
Honorable Bagos, is that right? Just briefly, we need to wrap up.
Segiwa is coming back to track by saying that members of the National Assembly are not contractors, but some of them do recommend, they don't even have any influence on that contract. And one thing I can tell you is that if you go to ICPC today, ICPC, it's monitoring most of the constituency projects. And one important thing which we even had an interface with the ICPC chairman 2 weeks ago on public procurement is that he categorically said that they are going around projects, and most of those constituency projects are executed. The ones that are not being executed are the ones that they're looking at how they will face prosecution and to even see how they will refund that. And
those were two separate things. The recommendation.
MDA, if any agency or MDA carry out or give out a contract just by mere recommendation by a member of the National Assembly, then that is fraud and that is wrong.
All right, gentlemen, we need to wrap up at this point in time. Honorable Dachun Bagos, member, Anti-Corruption Committee, and Mr. Giwa as well, who is a legal practitioner. Thank you both for talking to us this morning. We will be back in just a moment. Stay with us.
It's a solemn gathering as the ambulance conveying the body of late flying officer Tolulokwe Arotile arrives at National Military Cemetery in Abuja. The funeral rites commenced immediately with a faith service led by the director of Nigeria Air Force Chaplaincy. His message focused on the righteous dying.
The prophet Isaiah cried out on the fact that nothing seems to bother the society when those who hold the promise for tomorrow are vanishing, and no one seems to bother or worried. The prophet describes them as righteous, men and women that are godly, men and women that are respectful, men and women that are committed to doing good, men and women that live a godly life, men and women that cheat no one.
She was enlisted into the Nigerian Defense Academy, Kaduna, as a member of 64th Regular Course on the 22nd of September.
After the citation, a member of her family pays tribute to the sterling qualities of the late officer just as the Chief of Air Staff reels out her achievements.
As a child, Tolulope had always dreamed of flying a plane. At that age, her aspirations were blurry. But today, we can gladly all testify to the impact she has made, not only in the Nigerian Air Force, but among family members, friends, colleagues, and the entire nation.
As a combat helicopter pilot for several years, I can tell you that this young and confident first female combat helicopter pilot in the history of the Nigerian Air Force braved so many odds to get where she was before her demise.
In line with military tradition, a national flag is presented to the family of the late flying officer. With a minute silent in honor of late Tolulope Arotile, the casket is lowered, followed by a laying of wreath by the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Defense and other dignitaries. A 21-gun salute also rents the air. The National Military Cemetery is a place reserved for outstanding military officers, and having written her name in gold as Nigeria's first female helicopter combat pilot, late Tolulope Arotile joined other departed heroes to rest eternally in the nation's capital, Abuja.
The remains of Tolulope Arotile has been laid to rest, but the conspiracies don't seem to be ready to go away so soon. And that is why we have Air Commodore Ibikunle Damola, who is the spokesperson for the Nigeria Air Force, joining us in our Abuja studio this morning to take on some of the issues that are being raised. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We commiserate with the Nigeria Air Force on the loss of its own very dearly beloved ones. But you would also know that the conspiracies, just don't seem to go away. Yes, you have made some statements. You have released a lot of press releases for the people to consume. But then there's so many of these conspiracies. First of all, I'm very sure that you know that they are wide and varied. How is your department in the Nigeria Air Force taking this on?
Oh, thank you very much for having me on this morning. First of all, I would like to say that the Nigerian Air Force, and I believe indeed the entire nation, is still in deep shock and is mourning the loss of Flying Officer Tolulope Arotile because of what she stood for, what she represents, even as the best of us, what she had been able to achieve within her short lifespan of 24 years. So the Nigerian Air Force, starting with the Chief of the Air Staff, Air Marshal Sadiq Baba Abubakar, all the officers, airmen and airwomen, civilian staff of the service are in deep mourning. The Arotile family also is in deep mourning, and I believe, as I said, the entire nation is in deep mourning. But we are consoled by the fact that she left tangible legacies that will stand in the sands of time and will be a reference point for women folk and even young people in Nigeria and beyond to know that they can achieve their dreams, they can realize their full potentials, and they can make an impact in the nation as she has done. Now, because of what she stood for, being the Nigerian Air Force first female combat helicopter in its 56 years history now, it was 55 years when she was winged on the 15th of October 2019. Now, because she was known, not just in Nigeria and beyond, for setting that record along with her colleague, there has, of course, been a lot of interest. There has been a lot of attention that occasioned the fact that she passed away in such an untimely manner. And so the Nigerian Air Force understands this concern, we understand the attention that has been given to this because of the prominence, because also on the 6th of February this year, 2020, she was the one, because of the training she had received, the fact that she also went to Italy to train on the Agusta 109 power, which indeed is one of the first times that a student pilot, a student pilot at the time actually, undergoing a basic training at a particular location was taken to go for tactical training in Italy, and she qualified on the Agusta 109 power, came back to finish her basic training even before she was winged. And so she was very familiar with the characteristics and attributes of the helicopter,
Okay.
and she introduced it to Mr. President, and that was streamed live, to the entire world. So everybody, in one way or the other, knew Tolulope Arotile. And so when she passed on the 14th of July, 2020, usually the passing of a Nigerian Air Force personnel, when it's not combat related, is not disclosed to the public. It is our internal processes. We release what is called a notice of casualty, which tells the Nigerian Air Force personnel, the units concerned, so that administrative actions will be taken upon the death, and specifies the time of death, date of death, the particulars of the individual, and the cause of death. But because of, like I said, how widely she has become, her profile has gone beyond that of the Nigerian Air Force, there was a lot of attention. On that particular day, we heard
just
all
one moment,
kinds of
Commodore. Just one moment, Commodore
she
Damala.
slumped
We'll
and
take
died.
more of these
Yes.
comments when we return from this break, and also take another guest on this same issue. Please stay with us. Ekwelu also joins us on this matter, the death and the conspiracies around the death of flying officer Tolulope Arotile. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. First of all, you are aware of all that's been going on about this matter. What's your initial take?
Are you talking to me?
Vincent Ekwelu, yes, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Obviously, my initial take will be around the Nigerians, first of all, need to allow our dear sister, and my condolences to her family at this very difficult period, and for her friends and colleagues. We must also show a level of respect to the Nigerian Air Force. So far, so good. They've shown intent to give her a resounding respect that she deserves. Obviously, many schools of thought are asking very important questions. And many of them, I do not blame them, even though some of them sound like conspiracy theories. But you don't blame people in our society whereby things happen and nobody is held accountable. People are killed and nobody is arrested or prosecuted. So my initial thoughts, these are my initial thoughts, but from my professional perspective, there are very strong questions that Nigerians are asking, which I do support. So basically, let me start from the back and start going towards what happened to her. Now, if I may ask the Nigerian Air Force spokesperson, this lady, was she given an autopsy by the Nigerian Air Force to find out what actually happened to her, the cause of death? And very importantly, did the Nigerian Air Force allow the family of this young lady to do an independent post-mortem? Did they allow them to take her corpse to do their own independent autopsy? So their independent doctors will tell them independently what they thought or what they believe that killed their daughter. Because if this
just one moment, let's get the Air Force to respond to this very quickly. Commodore Daramala, you want to quickly respond to these two issues?
Okay, let me quickly respond to them. Before I do that, just to mention that the essence of sending out the first press release was to dispel all the other information that was out there, that she slumped and died in her house, or that she died as a result of an aircraft incident. And that was why it was specified initially that she died of head injuries as a result of a road traffic accident, which implies a vehicle colliding with another vehicle or with a pedestrian, which she was, or any other object. And that is the definition of a road traffic accident. Further press releases also gave additional information. Now, the circumstances surrounding it, of course, they are, when they are read out, it could not have been scripted any other way other than what happened, because it was freakish even in nature. But the facts are the facts, and this is how it happened. Now, regarding the request for an autopsy or otherwise, that would be initiated by the family. But based on discussions with them and the fact that witnesses were there, and at the time that she was taken to the Nigerian Air Force Hospital in Kaduna, there were no doubts as to the cause of death, which were head injuries as a result of blunt force trauma caused by the vehicle hitting her from the rear. So the family, in consultation with the family, the father, Engineer Akintunde Arotile, in discussions with him, he said he wanted closure on this matter, that he was comfortable with the Nigerian Air Force investigations, which of course is also being transferred to the police, because the police was involved from the outset. That's why I want to address even the issues that were raised yesterday. So regarding the family requesting an autopsy, was not done because it wasn't requested. The cause of death was already known based on the investigation and how she was taken to the hospital, and the confirmation was made. There were no doubts in that regard, and there was no request from the family for that specifically.
In other words, the Air Force did not conduct any autopsy?
No autopsy was done.
Okay. Mr. Fins, I thought you were going to make some other points before we move on to some other issues with Mr. Commodore Damola.
Yes. Obviously, I did not hear what he said about if there was an independent autopsy. I didn't get the autopsy.
He says that the family said they were comfortable with how the Air Force, had gone about it and their own investigation, so they didn't need to conduct any autopsy, an independent autopsy.
Okay, wonderful. My next interesting point I would like to raise will be about, now there's what we call absent victims in investigations, and there's what we call lack of witnesses, physical witnesses in investigation. So my next area of concern would be, since the victim herself, Tolu, is dead, because the dead cannot speak, so she's now an absent victim. Because in Nigeria, we've seen repeated issues where the victim is not given an opportunity to make a case afterwards. So she's out of the way. Now, who else saw what happened apart from the people in that particular vehicle that killed her? Is there no witnesses? Nobody in that vicinity? No cameras in that vicinity? No human being in that vicinity? Was it only her, our dear sister, that passed away?
No, no, the Commodore has spoken about that. He says that, yes, look, the part of the investigation included witnesses who also saw what transpired. So that he's addressed.
Okay, fantastic. Another very pertinent issue we need to consider is, has he identified the exact crime scene, the exact spot where this thing happened? I don't want to say it's along Social Road, the exact spot, because that happens to be a crime scene. And obviously, experts, when they go there, yes, I know the elements have taken place. There's been sunlight, there's been rainfalls, a lot must have disappeared in that crime scene. But we need to know the exact spot. And very importantly, the type of car that killed her and the make of car. So if it's a Toyota, is it a Toyota Hilux? Is it a Toyota Prado? Is it a Toyota Corolla? And then we need to hear this from him. And we need to move away. After you answer this question, I'll now make my concluding statement. Can you take these questions from me, then I can make my concluding statement?
Commodore, let me just bring in this to you. Yes, your statement did indicate, at the point which you contacted the police, you also did say that they were involved from the onset. But some of the questions there as well is, when the Air Force released a statement, since you said the police were involved at the time, one wonders, why couldn't it have been a joint statement, and why then hand over to the police afterwards?
Now, there is a process in terms of investigating incidents that occur in the Nigerian Air Force Base. First of all, we carry out a preliminary investigation to determine those who may be involved, their level of involvement, to interview witnesses, to look at the scene. And so in doing that, that is our own first stage of investigation, because it happened on the base. Let us know that the Nigerian Air Force has its own Air Police Directorate, where we have forensic investigators, K9 investigators, many of them who are trained both within and out of the country, some of them also who have had stints with the police force, training in police training institutions. So there is that, and there is a lot of collaboration between the Nigerian Air Force Air Provost Squadron or Air Police Wing and the Nigerian Police. So at the outset, immediately it occurred, the police was invited from the Kao police station, as mentioned during my press briefing, and also the Kaduna State Police Command was contacted. Yesterday, with due respect to the senior advocate who spoke yesterday, I'm not sure that he went through the details of that press briefing, because all of the issues he raised were there. He apparently chose to select certain aspects and amplify them without looking at others. The invitation of the police was done immediately, and it was escalated to the Kaduna State Police Command when Kawo could not give the required answers. The Federal Road Safety Corps was also invited in terms of providing expert, opinion and investigation in terms of the science of what happened at the scene. So the scene, as asked by the other speaker, Mr. Onyekwelu, was, properly preserved. During that period of time, our own forensic investigators went through the whole thing and extracted all of the information that was required. Like I mentioned, and of course he was asking, there were several witnesses that were interviewed, the eyewitnesses, those after the fact, everyone that had anything to do with the case. So it was a thorough preliminary investigation leading up to that which will be transferred. He alluded yesterday that the car was on one side and weaved to the other side of the road, and that many have been saying that. But even during the press conference, it was mentioned that she was walking on the same side of the road facing onward traffic, and that is the teaching. When you are jogging or walking, you should face where traffic is coming towards you so that you would avoid any incidents. Now, it was when the three occupants of the car, including Mr. Nehemiah Adejo that was driving the car, who incidentally are all her schoolmates from the Air Force Secondary School. The two others were her classmates, while Adejo was her junior by 1 year. And, I heard insinuations that he's 36 years. From the records, these are our schools, or this is our school. And so we have the records of when he entered the school, when he graduated, how old he was, born on the 23rd of June, 1996, and that makes him 24 years old. The other two, 24 and 26 years old. So I don't know where they got the age of 36 from.
All right, regarding the point you made.
What are in the official records.
Okay, the point you made about Air Police, their training, the canines that they've got, the investigation that the Air Police conducted. So at the point when you handed over to the police, does that then mean that the police is expected to rely on the investigation by the Air Force's Air Police?
By no means. By no means. Every investigation that is going to be handed over to the police, we are required to have our own records of what investigation was carried out. The essence is, first of all, in terms of an inquiry, to determine, as a fact-finding mission, to determine where to apportion blame or otherwise, to determine what actions need to be taken to avoid a reoccurrence, what recommendations need to be made to higher authorities. So all of that has to be on record. The evidence that needs to be gathered that will be kept with us and then transferred to the police has to be properly documented so that there are no gaps that are left behind. In terms of handing over to the police, and actually the handover would be done today, in terms of handing over to the police, it does not preclude any further investigation by the police. They will still call all of the witnesses. They will still interview everybody.
Pardon me to jump in.
They will still also visit the crime scene, but bringing them in from the beginning.
If you're going to hand over today,
pardon
me, if they're going to come in, you're going to hand over today, they can still go ahead and conduct their own investigations. Are all of those scenes still preserved as we speak? It would have been contaminated by now.
Obviously, even from the first day, after the first day, the scene was, of course, will be contaminated based on rain. But that is why I said from the first day, the Cow police station, the traffic officers from there were invited. An inspector and 2 corporals were brought in. And so they were part of that. So they were able to capture crime scene evidence that was relevant to them, and that would now form part of. So they don't necessarily have to take ours. But it is standard practice in terms of a case that will be handed over because the eventual prosecution has to be done by the police because it involves a civilian. Our investigations are to determine, are there service personnel involved in the case?
Well, let's take this very quickly to Mr. Onyekwelu.
Culpable? So that is where ours ends.
Yes, a number of other issues would be raised with you, Air Commodore Daramala, but let's bring this back to Mr. Onyekwelu. So, Mr. Onyekwelu, the police was involved from the very beginning, but the Air Force Police was also part of the investigation. Now, the case, according to him, will be handed over to the police, today. For them to continue and possibly prosecute the people who are involved in this matter. So what are your expectations from the police?
Obviously, let me say this very straightforward, because I needed to give the Air Force the opportunity to answer 1 or 2 questions for me to, obviously, from my professional perspective. Trust me, in my own perspective, with all due respect to the fantastic work Air Force does, now I'm convinced that there is an important need for a national investigation or inquiry into the passing of this fantastic young woman. Why do I say this? The Air Force are just about to hand this case to the Nigerian police force. The Air Force police are the Air Force police. They are military men. The Nigerian military police are military men. They are not police officers. What we are trying to do is totally different from what they do as Air Force police. So for the failures of the Nigerian Air Force to hand this case to the competent Nigerian police service to do their job, put a question mark on the Nigerian Air Force. Number 2, the inability of the Nigerian Air Force to open up and even force the family of this young woman to do an independent autopsy. If money is the problem, provide them money. Let them take the body of their loved one for 3, 4, 5 days and do their own independent autopsy. So nobody can suspect them of anything. And number 3, right now, the spot of where this thing happened, the physical witnesses, no camera, no technology, no CCTV camera, the names of the people involved are still wishy-washy.
But Mr. Onyekwelu, we have to thank you very much. These are very valid issues that you have raised, which we would also take with Air Commodore Daramala right now. But we have to thank you very much, Vince Onyekwelu, who is a security specialist. Well, Air Commodore Daramala, you heard some of the issues that he has raised. You want to quickly respond to them?
Now, I think it's only, we probably do not understand that the polices of the services are trained to the same levels in order to be able to function effectively, because they are responsible for carrying out all kinds of police functions within our Nigerian Air Force bases. And so it is in other climes. Whether it is in the United States of America or United Kingdom, we know of institutions such as the NCIS in the United States, where you have trained investigators, trained police personnel who handle issues that have to do with police. And there is a constant collaboration. Like I said, some of our police officers train in the same institutions as the Nigerian police, trained by the police, and we interact and interface with them. So any time that these investigations are going on, because by procedure, they may not be allowed to come into the Nigerian Air Force Base except they are invited. And like I said, they were invited immediately the incident occurred. So there is no issue of saying that there was
Air Commodore Darmala, just one moment. I think that's where the people usually have that problem, where they have a problem with the process, because if, as you have said, it's a civil case, and the police cannot come in, then the question then is, isn't the police supposed to be the lead agency in this kind of case? So if the police cannot come to the Air Force Base, that's where the questions come.
That's why I said they cannot come except they are invited. They were invited the same day.
But will they be able
the same day the incident occurred, the traffic, so they were invited to come and be part of the investigation.
Okay, when they speak about a lead agency and how this should be conducted, yes, the Air Force, they have their professionally trained men to do what they are trained to do. But in this case, there are those who believe that it will be tantamount to an abuse of process if the police were not contacted and then allowed to be the lead agency in this matter, since it involved a civil case. Because now you say you're just about to hand over those matters to the police, which many thought that they should have led the investigation from the onset and not just be invited as a party to the investigation.
Now, like I said earlier, the processes in terms of what happens, in an incident that happens in the Nigerian Air Force Base is for the preliminary investigation is usually carried out by the Nigerian Air Force. But when it, of course, now involves 3 civilians and involves the death of a personnel, the police is invited to begin to work with our investigators in carrying out the investigation. And that is what happened. In terms of now handing over what we have done in terms of the preliminary investigation, giving out the details of it and then handing over to the police is in line with our standard operating procedure in dealing with such cases.
Well,
so there's nothing that has been done out of the normal.
I'm afraid we have run out of time completely. We have to thank you very, very much for taking time in this very, very serious time where the Nigeria Air Force is going through. We appreciate the work you do, and we condole with the Nigeria Air Force, and of course, the entire nation condoles with you as well. Thank you very much for your time this morning and for sharing your thoughts with us. All right, we'll take a break now to take on some of your own contribution to Sunrise Daily today. Please stay with us. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Well, there are so many comments that you can, of course, consume on Twitter and, on, of course, the mails and all of that.
I see Musa Muhammad. Well, this is the phrase that everybody's been using. He says, look, ask the man in the studio, why was the chairman of the committee saying, it's okay, off your mic. That suggests that all is not well. Well, unfortunately, we missed that. We couldn't bring that up with him.
Especially because we would like you to enjoy just one more thing before we go.
Who are like my junior brothers, except for like they say it's up to 60, I don't know. I'm 60 plus. So you are near my age, but I'm at least 7 years older than you, I'm sure. I'm the same age with your mentor in Lagos, Asiwaju. And I was governor with him at the same time. He was a senator, I was a senator. I'm a two-time minister, he isn't a two-time minister.
But he won all his elections very well.
No problem about that. Just like you won your own in Kogi State very well.
Yes.
And you are now the deputy governor and governor of Kogi State.
Mr. Minister, please respond.
I'm responding, my friend. If you yab me, I yab you 10 times.
I won.
I'm a Lagos boy. I'm a Lagos boy. You are just a small boy in Lagos. Look at this boy. Mushin boy is talking to a VI boy. I live in Victoria Island. Look at Mushi boy. From Kogio. You are Oborobo. Just go. I don't get time for you. Kilo share.
We'll see you next week. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I'm Ayo Makede. Have a wonderful day. Please keep safe.